As we start off tonight, we're in John 10, if you want to head that way. But our connection group is studying a marvelous little book. It was actually written on the year I was born, so it's 54 years old. Philip Keller is the author, and it's entitled A Shepherd's Look at Psalm 23. And he shares his experience as of being a shepherd in East Africa. And this is what he says in that book. He says, the land adjacent to his own land was rented out by a tenant shepherd who didn't take very good care of his sheep. His land was overgrazed, eaten down to the ground. The sheep were thin, diseased by parasites, and attacked by wild animals. Keller especially remembered how the neighbor's sheep would line up at the fence and blankly stare in the direction of his green grass and his healthy sheep, almost as if they yearned to be delivered from their abusive shepherd. They longed to come to the other side of the fence and belong to him. You know, as Christians, we understand that the identity of our shepherd means everything. I mean, the identity of our shepherd means everything. And it is wonderful for us to be able to say, the Lord is my shepherd. But think of how many others in our world do not have that opportunity, cannot say that. Now, they have the opportunity, let me put it that way. They could have the Lord as their shepherd, but they can not say that at this moment. Well, tonight, Jesus talks about himself being the good shepherd. And you got to remember the context of what's going on here. Jesus has healed the blind man, and the former blind man was kicked out of the fold, as it were, the fold that the Pharisees were the shepherds of, kicked out of that fold, and Jesus essentially welcomes him in to the actual fold. He is one of the Lord's sheep. And so he picks up that imagery and he continues with it as he's teaching them, and he paints this picture of what God's kingdom looks like and the role he plays in that kingdom. And so that's really where we're picking it up. The man's been brought back into God's fold, and Jesus describes it as the sheep and the shepherd here in the beginning of John. So we're going to pick it up there. Start in verse 1. This is what it says. And Jesus is speaking, by the way. He says, I tell you the truth, anyone who sneaks over the wall of a sheepfold rather than going through the gate must surely be a thief and a robber. But the one who enters through the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep recognize his voice and come to him. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. After he has gathered his own flock, he walks ahead of them, and they follow him because they know his voice. They won't follow a stranger. They will run from him because they don't know his voice. Now, there's something unique in this text that we need to recognize, and that is that there are actually two sheep pens being described. Now, verses 1 through 5 is talking about one kind of sheep pen, and then 6 through 10 talks about a second kind of sheep pen. Excuse me. And the first kind of sheep pen is like one that would have been in a village, and it would have been built in the village, and there would have been walls on this sheep pen, and there would have been a gate to this sheep pen, but it would have been a communal sheep pen. And so all the sheep from all the flocks would have been in the same pen within the village. And so there might be Billy's sheep in there, and Todd's sheep in there, and Haley's sheep in there, and Brad's sheep in there. And then what would happen is when you wanted to take your sheep back out into the field, you go to that same sheep pen. Man, I got to get these terms right. And you go in past the gatekeeper who'd let you in, and then you would just say, hey, sheep, you need to come my way. Because they weren't branded and they weren't tagged. They didn't have a number on their ear or anything like that. They just knew who their shepherd was by their voice. And their shepherd knew who their sheep were. And so the shepherd would come in and call his sheep, and his sheep would leave. And the other sheep would stay. And if there were multiple shepherds, they'd all go out in different sections, call their sheep. Their sheep would go to the right place, and then they'd lead them on their way. Now, keep that in mind, because that's important to our text here. So, what is the difference between a shepherd and a thief? According to our text. The way they get in. A shepherd comes through the gate, but what does a thief do? The thief jumps over the wall. The sheep know the shepherd's voice, but what do the sheep, when they hear the thief calling, what do? They run away because they don't know who this guy is. Now, Jesus is making a point here that if we're not careful, we're going to miss. He's making the point, I'm the shepherd, which he tells us in a moment. You know, I'm the good shepherd. I'm the shepherd. I'm the shepherd. And the religious leaders of the day, guess what they are? The thief. They're the thief. He's the shepherd. They're the thief. That's what he's wanting them to understand. Now, this is completely going against what the entire Jewish system has been proclaiming. They've been proclaiming for years and years that they're the shepherds. That God is the good shepherd, but that they're his under shepherds, as it were. But Jesus says, whoa, no, they're the thieves, and I'm the actual shepherd. Now, in Galatians chapter 4, it says this. Think of it this way. If a father dies and leaves an inheritance for his young children, those children are not much better off than slaves until they grow up, even though they actually own everything their father had. They have to obey their guardians until they reach whatever age their father set. And that's the way it is with us before Christ came. We were like children. We were slaves to the basic spiritual principles of this world. But when the right time came, God sent his son, born of a woman, subject to the law. God sent him to buy freedom for us who were slaves to the law so that he could adopt us as his very own children. Now, I read that to you because God sends Jesus into a system that is really just a temporary system. It's to lead us to Jesus, which you could read Galatians 3 and you'll get that. But here in Galatians 4, essentially it's saying Jesus came into the system. He entered the right way through the system, but now he is removing the system altogether. He's taking care of it. It is gone. The old system is done away with. So Jesus came the right way. He came to fulfill the law. He came through the gate that was God's will, and he is the shepherd. He knows his sheep. They know him. But the religious leaders of his day are holding on to the wrong way, a way based on adherence to law, not grace, a way based on heritage, not faith. And so they're holding on to the wrong thing. Jesus is saying, wait a minute, it's transformed. By the way, Ezekiel mentions this. Ezekiel 34, you could read the whole chapter. We're not reading the whole chapter. Just read the first 5 verses. It says, then this message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds, the leaders of Israel. Give them this message from the sovereign Lord. What sorrow awaits you, shepherds who feed yourself instead of your flocks? Shouldn't shepherds feed their sheep? You drink the milk, wear the wool, and butcher the best animals, but you let your flocks starve. You have not taken care of the weak. You have not tended the sick or bound up the injured. You have not gone looking for those who have wandered away and are lost. Instead, you have ruled them with harshness and cruelty. So my sheep have been scattered without a shepherd, and they are easy prey for any wild animal. The shepherds of Israel have literally turned everything that God had called them to do on its head. Instead of caring for the sheep, instead of protecting God's people, they focused on themselves and their comfort. And they get called out in Ezekiel for it. And to be quite honest, Jesus calls them out in this text for it as well. Now, by the way, just real quickly, what does a good shepherd look like? I mean, how do they take care of their sheep? All right, they do protect them. They feed them. In our text, it says they know their names. So I want you to understand, Jesus knows your name. Not that you didn't understand that, but he knows your name. He leads them. That's what a shepherd does. He leads them. Notice what he does not do. In directing the sheep, what does he do? He doesn't dictate. He doesn't send out a mandate, you're going to do it this way. He doesn't herd them. What does he do? He leads them. He's out in front of them and he leads them. That is the difference in America. In America, if you have sheep, you herd them, but in Israel and all the other eastern areas, they lead them. There's a difference there. And not only that, but he speaks to them. There's a personal connection. There's constant communication. This leads me to the first lesson I think we need to get, and that is we haven't been called to religion, but into relationship. Now, we've said this multiple times, but it goes over and over again. Jesus keeps reminding of us, we haven't been called into religion, but into relationship. In Romans 8, it says, for all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. So we have not received a spirit that makes us fearful slaves. Instead, you received God's Spirit when he adopted you as his own children. Now we call him Abba, Father, for his Spirit joins with our spirit to affirm that we are God's children. We are led. We are declared children. We are participants in the intimate communication with God. And those who demand outward adherence rather than declare inward relationship should be considered suspicious and steered away from. If people are just demanding outward adherence instead of inward relationship, that is a problem. It's a huge problem. It's a huge signal that there's an issue that you better be aware of, at least be ready for. And so that's what the shepherds of Israel were doing, but that's not what Jesus does. Now, not to say that we shouldn't change, or not that our appearance outwardly shouldn't change because of the inward relationship, but the call is to the relationship that then changes us rather than to the adherence outwardly. It needs to be heart that leads to action, not the reverse of that. All right, so we'll go on, 6 through 10. Those who heard Jesus use this illustration didn't understand what he meant, so he explained it to them. I tell you the truth, I am the gate for the sheep. All who come before me were thieves and robbers, but the true sheep did not listen to them. Yes, I am the gate. Those who come in through me will be saved. They will come and go freely and will find good pasture. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is to give them rich and satisfying life. So we switch gears. Jesus switches sheep pens. And this one's the one that's out in the wilderness, which there would have been the sheep pens out there, out in the fields. They would have low walls, and they would have no gate. And guess where the gate would come from? The shepherd. The shepherd would get his sheep in here, and then they'd lay in the opening so that nothing could get in unless they came in through him, and none of his sheep could get out unless they went out through him. One or the other. Predators would have to go through him, and the sheep themselves would have to go through him. And that's what he says. He switches gears, and he says, all right, let's look at a different pen. And that's where he goes to the second pen here, second type of pen, and he says, I am the actual gate. Now, what is he declaring in a very clear way here? He's the only way in. He's the only way in. He is the way of salvation. In John 14:6, we keep reading this. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Not only that, but the next verse in our text, he talks about how he protects the flock. John 10:11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. That's what the gate does. That's what the shepherd as the gate does. And not only that, but he's the one who's always with the flock. And in Matthew 28, verse 20, it says, these new disciples, teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I've given you, and be sure of this, and listen to what he says, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So I just want you to understand, in communicating that he is the gate, he's really communicating a whole lot of stuff. He says, you can't get into the flock except through me. You're going to be protected by me, and just know I'm always there with you. Now, how do we do 10:10? How are we supposed to look at 10:10? John 10:10, which is one of my favorite verses. This one says the thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. And my purpose is to give them rich and satisfying life. How are we supposed to understand that? All right. Let me ask you this. Rich and satisfying life. Does that mean that we will have all the financial and physical pleasure we could possibly want in this life? No. That's an American thought. That is us thinking from our perspective, but that's not at all. Go to India, go to Africa, go to any place else and say, well, that's what rich and satisfying life means. You're going to have everything you possibly could want. You're going to have an abundance that just overflows in every direction. And they're going to just look at you like you have lost your mind. That's not what he's saying. We will have a rich and satisfying life. And by the way, that could mean that our life could have a lot of financial resources and you get to experience a lot of the physical pleasures of this life. That may be true, but that's not what this is promising. This is saying that we will have purpose and we will be satisfied both now and eternally in Jesus. And that changes how we view life completely. If we recognize just how much we've been blessed because of what Jesus has done and how long we're going to be blessed because of what Jesus has done, that changes how we see everything. Now, Satan wants to get us distracted from that and get our mind on the financial and the physical pleasures of this world. He wants to kill our desire to fulfill the purpose we've been given. He wants to steal away our joy that is found in Jesus. He wants to destroy our witness and our eternities. But Jesus says, in me, all of those things are satisfied. You're going to find what you need to really find satisfaction in this life. And I think sometimes, not us, but the church, quote, church, has said, you're going to have this and you're going to have that and everything's going to be rosy and everything's going to be good. And that's not true. In fact, quite the opposite is true. I thought about listing off some of those verses, but I decided that you all knew some of those verses that I didn't need to list them all off. But if you want to live for Christ, lots of times it's going to be with struggles and with suffering. All right, we're going to keep going, 11 through 13. I am the good shepherd, he says. The good shepherd sacrifices his life for the sheep. A hired hand will run when he sees a wolf coming. He will abandon the sheep because they don't belong to him, and he isn't their shepherd. And so the wolf attacks them and scatters the flock. The hired man runs away because he's working only for the money and doesn't really care about the sheep. If you were going to explain to someone the difference between an actual shepherd and the hired hand, how would you describe it?
Shepherd die for you.
All right. All right. Yeah, I would put it like this. The good shepherd, he puts it all on the line for his sheep. A hired hand, he puts himself first. Good shepherd, motivated by love for his sheep. Hired hand, motivated by what he's going to make, how much money he's going to get at the end of the day. Interestingly enough, this is what Jesus said, or not Jesus, talking about Jesus, this is what Peter says later. It says, and now a word to you who are elders in the church. I too am an elder and a witness to the sufferings of Christ, and I too will share in his glory when he is revealed to the whole world. As a fellow elder, I appeal to you, care for the flock that God has entrusted you. Watch over it willingly, not grudgingly, not for what you will get out of it, but because you are eager to serve God. Don't lord it over people assigned to your care, but lead them by your good example. And when the great shepherd appears, you will receive a crown of never-ending glory and honor. Even now, the Good Shepherd expects his, and I don't know what to call them except for under-shepherds, elders, but under-shepherds, to walk in his footsteps. That's what he's called elders to do. Motivated by the love of the sheep and the desire to honor God and being willing to lead regardless of personal cost. That's what he does. That's what he calls the shepherds to do. Follow in my footsteps. Do what I've done. You're not hired hands. You are my shepherds. All right, we're getting close to where we're going to end. 14 through 18. I'm the good shepherd. I own my sheep and I know my sheep and they know me, just as my Father knows me and I know the Father. So I sacrifice my life for the sheep. I have other sheep too that are not in this sheepfold. I must bring them also. They will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock with one shepherd. The Father loves me because I sacrifice my life so I can take it back again. No one can take my life from me. I sacrifice it voluntarily, for I have the authority to lay it down when I want to, and also to take it up again. For this is what my Father has commanded. How do you know Jesus? How do you know Jesus? Let me put it that way. What was that? All right, through his Spirit. That is one. It's not the one I was thinking of. I'm not discounting that. That is absolutely true. Here. All right, let me read you. This is it, Luke 6. So why do you keep calling me Lord, Lord, when you don't do what I say? I will show you what it's like when someone comes to me, listens to my teaching, and then follows it. It is like a person building a house who digs deep and lays a foundation on solid rock. When the floodwaters rise and break against that house, it stands firm because it is well built. But anyone who hears and doesn't obey is like a person who builds a house without a foundation. When the floods sweep down against that house, it will collapse into a heap of ruins. How do you know Jesus? You know Jesus because you are, in a very practical way, putting into practice what he says. That's how you know you know. You know by doing what he says. You know because your life is based on what he says. You know because you're willing to risk it all because of what he says. That's how you know. He says you can claim Lord, Lord, but if you don't listen to what he says, you don't know. You don't really know him. You know his name, but that's it. You don't know him. You know about him, but you don't know him. Now, what is Jesus talking about when he talks about other sheep? Gentiles, that's right. Everyone else. In the Jewish world, there were Jews and then everyone else. And guess who everyone else was? Gentiles, all of us. I don't know any of you who are actually Jewish by heritage. Now, good news is, as Christians, we're all Jewish. Romans chapter 2, at the end of that says that. I think verse 19 or whatever it is, the very last two verses. But it's Gentiles. And I want you to listen to what it says in Ephesians 2. It says, for Christ himself has brought peace to us. He united Jews and Gentiles into one people when, in his own body on the cross, he broke down the wall of hostility that separated us. He did this by ending the system of law with its commandments and regulations. He made peace between Jews and Gentiles by creating in himself one new people from the two groups. Now, the reason I mentioned that to you, well, for a lot of reasons, but one of the big reasons is there are not Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians. There are Christians, regardless of their background. That means there are not, this type of Christian and that. You fill in the blank. Any type of Christian you want to throw in there, not such a thing. There is no such thing as that. There is just Christians. We're Christians or we're not Christians. That's pretty much it. And by the way, no matter where we fall into the groupings, whatever groupings we have. If we're a Christian, guess what we are? We're a part of the same family, a part of the same flock, a part of the same people. That's who we are. Which leads me to another lesson, and that is that Christianity is for all and unites us all. How often do we divide ourselves up? Well, there's this group of Christians, and there's that group of Christians, and then there's that group of Christians, and then there's that group of Christians, and we just keep adding to it. We just keep making up groups. This group, that group, every other group. John 17, Jesus is praying, I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one, as you are in me, Father, and I am in you, and may they be in us, so that the world will believe you sent me. I have given them the glory you gave me, so that they may be one as we are one. I am in them, and you are in me. May they experience such perfect unity that the world will know that you sent me, and that you love them as much as you love me. Is that how you describe the church today? One big unified body. So if we're not going to describe the church that way, where's the problem? Where's the problem lie? Yeah, we're the problem. Now, if we know we're the problem, we recognize we're the problem, we even admit we're the problem, how do we encourage and cultivate unity in spite of that? That's what we need to ask ourselves. First of all, I think there's something we need to recognize. If we want to be united, the very first thing we need to reunite on is the authority of God's word alone. Alone. God's word will just do what it says. Number one. Number two, if we want to be united, liberty where God's word is silent. We just say, hey, if God's word doesn't speak, we don't speak. That's what the Restoration Movement said way back when. Restoration Movement said, where the God's word is silent, we're going to be silent. Where God's word speaks, we're going to speak. The problem is far too many churches have decided where God's word is silent, we're going to speak. Where God's word speaks, if we don't like it, we're going to be silent. That's what the church does. But that's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. That's the exact opposite of what we should be doing. We need to be united. And to be quite honest, we can only really unite if we will accept God's word as authoritative and follow it. And when it's silent, then we let people choose. If it doesn't say it, we don't say it. If it does say it, we say it. But if it doesn't say it, we're like, nope, not saying it. Not my purview. All right. Now, Jesus declares an important truth in verses 17 and 18. What is the important truth? Yeah, that's exactly right. Jesus says, I'm going to lay down my life willingly, and then I'm going to pick it back up again. What's he talking about? I'm going to die on the cross willingly, but my death's only going to be temporary, and then I'm going to resurrect out of the grave. He's telling them in advance what's going to happen. Do they understand it? No, not completely. But that's what he's telling them. But he wants them to understand, and I think it's important we understand it too. He voluntarily lays down his life. It's his choice, and he chooses to lay down his life. All right, last three verses. When he said these things, the people were again divided in their opinion about him. Some said, he's demon-possessed and out of his mind. Why listen to a man like that? Others said, that doesn't sound like a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? How does the crowd react to Jesus' declaration here? Back to division. He's demon-possessed. Now, I want you to understand there's two ways that they were using that. One is the source of his power is demons. That's one way. But there is a second way that's not as bad as that. He's mentally ill. That's what he's saying. That's the other way that he gets. He's crazy. He's nuts. He's Looney Tunes. That's what they're saying. It can mean both of those things. And I think it means actually both of those things here. Some are saying, yeah, he's getting his power by a demon. Others are saying, he's just lost it. He's off his rocker. You know, he's some fries short of a Happy Meal. And that was even before Happy Meal. Which leads me to the last lesson we need to leave with tonight, and that is people will always be divided over Jesus. Always. But here's what you need to understand, at least in my opinion. Don't let that truth keep you from sharing the gospel. Because that shouldn't discourage us. That should embolden us. Because to be quite honest, I'm not responsible for how people receive the good news. I'm only responsible that they hear the good news. I'm supposed to share it with them. I'm supposed to tell them about it. And we know from the very beginning, they've been divided over Jesus the whole time. So it should set me free. If someone doesn't believe in Jesus, that doesn't mean I should be like, well, I didn't say it right. No, you might have said it exactly right. Some people are going to accept him, and other people are going to reject him. And it's up to them. So it should set us free. People will always be divided over Jesus. Always. Some are going to come to him and accept what he has so graciously given us. Others are going to reject him for whatever their reasons are. They're going to reject him and deny who he says he is.